everyone from Ski Instructor Academy. Well, in this series of videos, I'm going to be discussing how things off the hill can really affect your skiing on the hill. We're going to be looking at things like fitness, strength and conditioning, mobility, stability, the whole concept of anything that can affect your snowboarding and skiing. So first of all, from the side of fitness, we need to decide what exactly that means to you. I'm sure you know somebody that you think and believe is a very, very fit individual, whether it be, an athlete that you follow, or it be somebody that you know within your family or friend circle. And of course, people sometimes have the perception of, oh, that guy's just done a marathon, he's super fit. Or this person's a fantastic football player, he's a super fit guy. And the concept and ideas of what we believe fitness are maybe a little bit broader than you think. And of course, no matter what you look at, some people take fitness to an extreme, and like a downhill skier, they're taking their life into their own hands sometimes when they're going down some of these race courses. And it's really important that they're not just physically but mentally prepared for what's in store. And we're going to look at these things today. So fitness can be broken up into 10 general physical skills. This might help you understand what we mean by fitness when you think, for example, you yourself are super fit or somebody you know is super fit. If we break it into the top 4 here, we're talking about the cardiovascular, respiratory, the endurance skill, the stamina, the strength and flexibility. We would say that these skills are organic. When you're doing a bicep curl, this would be a strength and organic type of strength training. Similarly, if you're riding a bike, there's not much skill in riding a bike, let's say, apart from just making sure those pedals turn, the cardiovascular part of it. The bottom part is more neuromuscular. It's more this idea of the nervous system being involved. And the top things here, you just basically train these things. These things require practice. So when somebody's good at coordination, agility, balance, and accuracy things, so let's take the extreme of a gymnast, a dancer, they're very aware of themselves in space, and they have great coordination, super good balance and accuracy of movement, and they're agile. And if you would think about it from the skiing or boarding aspect, you would understand that this could be a very, very important part of these fitness skills. The middle 2, power and speed, they actually require training and practice. And they are fundamentally the most important thing that you really need in a lot of what you do. So think about it now when we look at the concept of somebody who is super fit. Are they actually super fit in some area here and they have an advantage in some area, or are they in general touching all 10 of these physical skills? And we're going to come on to that when we talk more about sport and how these physical skills can have an effect if there is a gap or a weakness in one of them. So we're then going to discuss the metabolic pathways. And I think most people are very aware that we have this anaerobic and aerobic pathway. I think most people have heard of that, and most people think about aerobic pathway as going for a jog, doing a long bike ride. But actually it's mostly anything that's over 120 seconds long. In fact, if you're sitting and watching this now, you are in the oxidative pathway by just sitting and watching this. That is where you are sitting. Now, in these other 2 pathways, which are generally the anaerobic pathway, they are sub 120 seconds, and you might think of them like high intensity interval training, Tabata circuits, 400-meter sprint, or the extremes of going into the phosphagen pathway, where again it's a 100-meter sprint. It's extremely short. A 1 rep maximum squat or deadlift, for example, would fall in the phosphagen pathway. But in this oxidative pathway, what we find is people generally do most of the training in this area and are not doing enough to affect the muscle fiber type 2 and they end up training the muscle fiber type 1 more. It's natural that we do this actually as we get older, and this is why you can often see some great ultra marathon runners getting really good into their 40s and 50s, have actually been really super good at running these huge distances, or biking becomes quite a favoured task from older people as well, and they can sit on the bike for 3-4 hours and do incredible rides, and this is because it's favouring this pathway. Whereas a lot of what we're doing in here is this uncomfortable zone of where we might be doing some sort of high intensity circuit that really leaves us feeling very uncomfortable during the actual exercising period. And if you go into any gymnasium around the world, you will see most people falling into this bracket of training. You know, they're sitting next to each other on a static bike, they're talking to each other, or they're on one of the jogging machines, or they're doing these weird cross-trainy type machines that just don't make any sense to functional movement. So we naturally are favouring ease, and it's general in our society nowadays that we are locked into comfort. We even in our own training we seek comfort as well. So here, you know, I also enjoy that aerobic style training. I also enjoy going for long bike rides or a run, etc. But one thing for certain, favouring one or two to the exclusion of the others, not recognising the impact of excessive training in the oxidative pathway, are arguably the two most common faults in fitness training. What that's basically saying is, by favouring this pathway here, I am really having a detrimental effect on my ability to have power and speed, to have that coordination, agility, that balance, etc. So we need to start looking at what are we doing outside of skiing. If you ever get the chance to go to a track event, and let's use these athletes as being a good example, if you look at the 100, 200, 400, 800, which are largely anaerobic in their pathway, compared with the 2, 3, 5,000 to marathon distances, which are aerobic in the pathway, and you look at the two body types, you would probably quickly see the difference, okay? And these people here who are favouring low power extended efforts often see a decrease in muscle mass, strength, speed and power. And when we measure, less of doing vertical jump measurements now, but in the past where we did a lot of vertical jump measurements, you would see these people really struggling to get off the ground sometimes. Whereas these guys here can spring up. Now we prefer things like triple jumping, doing 3 jumps to see like a distance length. But once again, the explosiveness from the power and speed element these guys have far outweighs this. But of course, you can't turn around and say these guys aren't the most incredible athletes. They have decided in their life to dedicate themselves to this sport, but they intelligently will also know that it does have a bearing on other things. They'll tell you themselves, you know, maybe when they've finished these training days of how tired they are, etc. They put a lot of effort into it, and they know that they couldn't, for example, do a deadlift of twice their body weight, for example. It just would probably not be possible for them. Whereas these guys here are doing a different type of training. But equally, they could never run like these guys, okay? And we have to decide within skiing and boarding is what is going to best assist us to get the dynamic skiing we're seeking. So, anaerobic activity also benefits cardiovascular function and decreases body fat. So what I'm trying to point out here, when I'm lifting on a hex bar deadlift, this is over 200 kilos. It's almost 3 times my body weight, that weight. When I'm lifting that, it has a huge effect on me. And this anaerobic conditioning allows us to exert tremendous forces over a brief moment in time. So this is definitely that sub 10-second thing we were talking about. And when you finish lifting that much weight, it has a huge effect on the central nervous system as well. Indeed, to recover from a few sets of this, it would take me a good 4 or 5 days to settle the body back down. It has such a high effect on you. So we want to be aware that anaerobic activity is very unique. It has the capacity to improve power, speed, strength, and muscle mass. Intensity is something also that I've noticed people shy away from more and more in gymnasiums as we get more comfortable with trends. Now, once again, intensity can be meant in a lot of ways. Let's take this idea of just doing a back squat for time. So we did 100 back squats with 50 kilograms. So that's, it's fair weight for 100 times somebody who weighs 70 kilograms. And we competed against each other to see who could do it quickest. So here, when we see this obviously sped up, is, achieving this in 3 minutes, or 3 minutes 30, I think it was. That's huge intensity. You're trying to rattle off these sets, and the body is under tremendous stress under this very short frame of time. And indeed, once again, to recover from that's not easy. The idea of this session was we went in and spent 20 minutes greasing things, warming up the necessary joints, getting the heart a little bit going as well, so that we could do this. But when this was finished, we were finished. That was it. Dust your hands off and go home and do some late night mobility or something before you go to bed. And you felt this the next day. You definitely felt it during the set as you were almost throwing up. That's intensity. Now, you can't search for that level of intensity every single day, and especially as you get older, recovery, regeneration is very important. If you have the opposite side of that spectrum, like myself, who does too much volume at times and is too intense at times, it's also detrimental. It's one of the problems that I fight with all the time. But you would find most people are actually the opposite side of that. They're always looking for the Dorothy sessions, the easy, simple gym sessions where they go in and do chest and arms and sit on the bike for 20 minutes. There's no intensity to that, really. We need to encourage people to do at least twice a week, something that's going to leave them in a bit of an uncomfortable position. So it brings me on to helping you understand how to increase intensity as well. If we look at functional exercise versus isolation training, it will become more apparent what I mean by this. In most fitness studios, gyms around the world, you will see machines of all sorts, like the leg extension machine or the leg curl machine. These are all machines that are created through a market to basically sell to fitness studios at a high cost to put in to make their fitness studio look cool. People can go in and be relatively safe because machines like this are hard to abuse in such a way. You can also staff these gymnasiums with people who don't have to be highly trained in anatomy, biomechanics or coaching, because it's just a machine. As long as we know how to set the pins for the length of this lady's legs, then hey, it's going to be pretty self-explanatory what to do. Let's do 3 sets of 10 of this, off you go. So the gyms are designed around this safe element, but this is isolation training. There's no part in sport where I actually make this type of movement that I can think of in isolation. Whereas, what we do, for example, in a front squat here, this is challenging functional movement. It is multi-joint functional movement. And it's much more, even though it's just a bilateral exercise, most of what we do is often unilateral, but here it's a bilateral exercise. But you can see the joints are going through a very large range of movement. And to be able to do the front squat position requires good T-spine mobility, good ability to have your lats open up and to be able to hold the bar up front, good ankle mobility and hip mobility. So this is functional movement. But of course, the problem with this is it requires training and somebody to come in and show you what to do. And this is why when we're teaching in strength and conditioning, we actually prefer to teach somebody a front squat position before a back squat position. And I can do that very easy by getting a kettlebell and just doing a goblet squat and placing it to the front and squatting with the weight here, because that changes the center of mass to be more forward, and therefore the back can be more upright, and that's easier. I can also assist the person. We look at this when we start measuring mobility in the ankle joint by giving them some sort of heel raise, which we'll talk about later. Now, As we go through the closing part of this presentation about your general wellness, fitness or sickness, we need to understand what that is. And the problem is a lot of what we understand from these areas have been basically migrated from the 1950s, 60s and 70s and haven't really changed much. So way back in 89, this guy here was already warning the world about basically taking in too much insulin spiking, which has led to the deadly quartet that we know, whether it be strokes and obesity, anything related, type 2 diabetes, for example, Alzheimer's, etc. Things like this are probably related more to diet, not just the fact that people aren't as mobile as they used to be, but also diet has an issue because even as a great strength conditioning coach or whatever, I can do something with somebody for 1 hour, 4 or 5 times a week, but I don't know what they're doing the other 23 hours in the day. Are they just sitting in front of a computer? Are they eating, sugary snacks, etc.? Well, it's not really going to help them that 1 hour of training in a day. For the rest of the 23 hours, they're abusing their body. Of course, we're not all elite athletes, and we all want to enjoy our life. So we do want our glass of wine, our beer, or our chocolate bar. There's nothing wrong with that, but be aware of the effects in these insulin spikes can have on your body, and just be aware of how much sugar intake you are having, and making sure that you're aware of that, even to the point of people drinking gallons of fruit juice, that oh, it's healthy, it's orange juice. Why? Just eat an orange. You don't need to squeeze 7 of them into a glass and drink it. You're just hugely spiking your insulin levels, and this really does have an effect on us. So I want you to be aware of the difference between the wellness and the fitness area more so, because most people fit into the wellness zone. They sit in what they've been told to do by the doctors, by medical experts and scientists. Oh, 120/80 blood pressure. Let's make sure our resting heart rate's under 70, etc. Fat body percentage for a male at 18 and for a woman at 20%. Now, that may be okay, but I can guarantee you that does not put you into a healthy position. We really, really want to be over in this area. And it's very easy to know that because nowadays you can buy cheaply, a blood pressure monitor. They're all digital, they're easy to follow, and you can check this, once or twice a week, especially when you're feeling a bit off or ill or tired, and see what your blood pressure is. But if you're 120/80, you're being told by the doctor, oh, that's fine. Keep going, keep going. My argument would be you should be pushing this sort of figures. Okay, and that's going to come through good exercise, good diet as well. Then your resting heart rate. Everybody nowadays has some sort of smartwatch. I'm using the Apple one for years and years, and it's great because it doesn't just track my heart rate now, but it tracks my sleep, it tracks my, how often I'm getting up and moving around, my standing time, etc. So being able to track your heart rate's a simple way again. When I sleep and resting heart rate is somewhere between 39, 40, 42 would be my resting heart rate. If I wake up one morning and I look and go, oh, it's at 46, 47, straight away I've got alarm bells ringing. Have I, again, been doing a typical me, too much training, and led to a bad night's sleep? I've had no deep sleep in there, and I've been tossing and turning all night, or I'm tired and I should really be taking a rest day today. I can monitor that. Or am I getting sick? And I can be aware of it and think, right, today I'll ease it down, see what happens the following night and see if it settles. I want to get in that most sensible solution is let's start drinking lots of fluids, get some water into me, electrolytes into me all through the day, and start looking after myself. And it's easy to monitor these two things. Even fat percentage is relatively easy to monitor nowadays. Okay, these scales that measure you from the feet up are probably not very accurate, but I suppose if you're using the same bathroom scales all the time, you can see what your weight and your fat percentage is to a degree. But be very aware of the difference between how much muscle weighs compared with how much fat weighs in your body. And knowing exactly the fat content is relatively important. I usually sit somewhere between the 7% to 9%. Yet the doctors are telling me, and I will lose points on my gym score when I'm in a normal gymnasium, because they'll be saying, you don't have enough body fat. And body fat is important because it's going to help keep me healthy from colds, coughs, flus. You know, if you keep lowering your body fat too much, below 5%, then yes, you're going to be putting yourself at risk of catching infections. But certainly it doesn't have to be at 18. And if you find that you are at 17 or 16, you might look at that and think, well, that's great, that's super, that's a good number. Well, that puts you into the wellness bracket. It doesn't put you over here where I would argue that you should be aiming for. Most gyms nowadays have relatively accurate measurement tools for this, you know, plus or minus 1.5%. So this is a great way to look at it. And remember, one of the most important things is your diet. And I'm not going to argue, you know, people have trendy diets, paleo, Atkins, vegan, vegetarian, etc. You know, I'm not here to tell you what you should eat, but what I'm going to tell you is that some people very much can live because they also have a great lot of knowledge of food on a vegan diet, for example. And they're very good and they find it very good for them. They feel great. Super. But equally, some people suffer badly on a vegan diet and they just can't do it. Their lifestyle is too difficult for them to be on a vegan diet. Maybe they travel a lot and trying to find good access to vegan food becomes difficult for them. Or it just doesn't suit them. They do need some meat. Great. Some people work well on a vegetarian diet and that diet works great for them, but it doesn't work for this other person standing next to them. Don't argue and look for your proof of what is the best diet in the world by watching Netflix and looking at social media. Because the minute you turn around and say, I am going to look at being a vegan, your phone is going to get hammered with how wonderful it is to be a vegan and how it's the best thing since sliced bread. That's the problem. It favors one thing. What you need to do is educate yourself on what you should be doing, but also test yourself. You have your whole life to test. Oh, maybe I will try a vegan diet for 6 months and see what happens, you know, if you've got that discipline, or a vegetarian diet. What feels better? Was the vegan diet or the vegetarian diet better? And of course, the problem is why a lot of statistics might show that a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet is better than a meat diet is more to do with the fact that the person who's the vegan or the vegetarian is probably very active because they are conscious of looking after themselves. And a lot of the time the statistics from the meat person are taken from people who are going to McDonald's and getting, like, you know, these greasy chips with it, etc., and bad fats into their body. So it's really for you to look at personally, and nobody can tell you whether you should be one or the other. That's entirely up to you. And once you get your diet tuned in, then great. My argument is, from my side, put my personal opinion on it, is the only thing that has any scientific strength and proof is intermittent fasting of some sort. Everything else is a choice. If you want to be vegan, vegetarian, or eat, you know, a carnivore diet, that's fine. However, intermittent fasting, there's a lot of proof about intermittent fasting and the benefits to it, especially up here. So maybe that's something you might want to look at too. So this ends the first chapter of what I wanted to do, an introduction to health and fitness. We'll be moving on with the next part. I hope you join us. See you soon.